All right, I'm Cameron. I'm the co-founder of Zydu, and today I'm super happy to have Jason Falls. He doesn't need much of an introduction, but for those that may not know, who may have not been on the internet in a long time, he is the founder and CEO of Social Media Explorer, a digital marketing agency and education products company. He's worked with and advised some big brands on social media marketing, including Jim Beam, AT&T, GE, and some other Fortune 100 brands. And he is the co-author of the book No Bullshit Social Media, the all business, no hype guide to social media marketing. So anything else you want to add to that intro, Jason?
I got another book too. It's called
Cool.
It's called The Rebel's Guide to Email Marketing. Just came out, so it's new.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I wanted to talk with you about social media marketing today. And I've got four questions, kind of starting out real up high, and then kind of going down into a little bit more specifics. But just to kick things off, I mean, again, in your content and your talks, you're all always focused on a certain element of kind of frankness and practicality. So, in your estimation, why should businesses take social media marketing seriously, and what results can they really expect to produce?
Well, I think, social media marketing should be taken seriously because that's, quite frankly, that's where the consumers are spending more of their time. Now, I'm not going to go off the deep end like a lot of other social media consultants and say that television is dead or newspapers are dead or radio is dead, because they're not, quite frankly. In fact, social media users, more than 50% of social media users say that they watch television frequently, still read magazines and newspapers frequently, so on and so forth. I think the newspapers is actually slightly under 50%, but the listen to the radio certainly. But basically, the social media is where people are now spending a lot of time in addition to consuming traditional media. So advertising is certainly still viable, and it's a great way to push your message out there. Social media, though, is an opportunity for you to get a little bit closer to the bone with your customers, to build relationships with them over time. I would think that most businesses, if they get into social media and they start to really look at what happens on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Google Plus and all these channels, they can start to sort of carve out what would probably be more suitable for a customer retention strategy than a customer acquisition strategy. Doesn't mean you can't acquire customers using social media. You certainly can, because if you're offering great content and great insight and opportunities for engagement, you can certainly attract a new audience. But it's really a great place to foster and build stronger relationships with your customers so that they spend more, are more loyal, are more lifetime customers, and more valuable to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had a chance to interview your partner Nicole a couple weeks back, and we ran into her at the Marketing Sherpa B2B Summit. In terms of measurability, I mean, I know not a lot of organizations out there are necessarily focusing on strict measurability with respect to their social media marketing, but for those that are, what sort of measurable results do you think can be achieved?
Well, it depends on the industry, and it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. The further away you get from online retail, the more, I don't want to say difficult, but the more complex the measurement systems have to be so that you can, say when we push this button on the internet, this happens offline.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be complex. I don't necessarily think it's hard. It's just complex. You have to think about it a little bit more intently. You have to plan to measure. And so the results that you can affect range anywhere. If you're an online retailer, you can certainly measure your activity on social networks, and when you drop links back to your website or wherever people can purchase your product or service, or if you're just generating leads, so maybe in more of a B2B situation, you want more email addresses that gets those customers closer to your funnel. You can track where those leads come from. You can track where those sales come from online. I think it's always inaccurate to say we can say definitively this is where the customer or revenue comes from, because I may click on a link that you drop on Facebook and come through and buy something from you, but you have no way of knowing whether or not I encountered your brand in 4 other touch points before that point.
Right.
So what we can be really, really effective with is measuring sort of the last point of contact with the brand before purchase. But social media is really, really good, I think, at a lot of other points leading up to a purchase, and certainly a lot more after a purchase, because again, once you're a customer and you raise your hand and say, I like you on Facebook, or I follow you on Twitter, or maybe I have customer service issues and I'm going to use social as a channel to reach you for that, social does a really good job of taking care of those post-purchase consumer touch points too.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love the focus on retention. And it seems to be something that folks are thinking about a little bit more. But, you know, between you and Nicole, there's not a whole lot of people that we've encountered that are really kind of, you know, pressing that button. So moving on, what myths and misconceptions are you still encountering? I know, you know, in a lot of your kind of past talks, you've, you know, addressed kind of a lot of how social media marketing, perhaps in the early days, was really focused on this kind of purist mentality that wasn't really connected to business. But, you know, in the year 2012, what are you seeing with the companies that you're working with?
Well, I think some of the things that the mistakes that companies are still making, and I think this is true of not just social media marketing, but all marketing, is too many marketers. I mean, because we have such a fractured media landscape and there's so many different channels and there's a lot of noise and not enough signal, I think marketers, for the most part, are looking for an easy button. And they're looking for a button to press, or an agency to dish out this work on, or an intern to hire to handle this piece of what I have to do, because I've got way too much going on. I've got way too many decisions to make. I've got way too much to handle. And social is just another thing that I've got to fool with. Unfortunately, social is not something you can just pawn off on someone else. It's better done. It's more effective. It's more genuine if it's done by those who are closer to the bone with the brand, the people who are decision makers within the company. So pawning it off on an intern, while you can certainly be effective with that tactical approach, it's going to be better if someone higher up the chain is making the content decisions, is interacting with customers, so on and so forth. And so I think the biggest mistake and the biggest myth that I still come across today is that companies think that social is just something that they can, well, let's give it to the younger staff members because they understand it. Well, what you're doing in that situation many times, not all the time, because young people can certainly think strategically and be smart about this, but in many situations what you're doing in that scenario is you're saying, here, a person who doesn't have really any brand or marketing or communications experience, doesn't know how to speak on behalf of the brand, has never dealt with crisis communication situations, is not trained as a customer service representative. I'm going to let you talk on behalf of my company publicly all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's dangerous. Now, again, there are some younger people out there who can think more broadly, can fake it till they make it, learn as they go, and do really good jobs with community management, content, so on and so forth. But you are literally putting, in those scenarios, very, very green employees on the front line representing your entire company on social networks where the content can be indexed and found in search engines and so on and so forth. And that's still a problem to this day with many companies.
Well, let me expand on that just a little bit. We're running into a lot of larger organizations that seem to be pressing forth on initiatives to get everyone in their organization, or a particular division like a sales team or something like that, getting socially active. And getting socially active basically meaning both, personally, and starting to kind of incorporate some content around, the industry that the company that they work for competes within, or content concerning their company. Do you see any similar, are you running across that? Do you see what sort of challenges you see in those types of efforts, and maybe what upsides?
Yeah, especially in your, companies with large sales forces, or, certainly B2B situations when you have a sales team, I'm seeing a lot more companies say, okay, We believe that social media can drive leads. We believe that effective communication from our individuals, even in their own personal social networks, can lead to business. I'm seeing this a lot more, obviously, with sort of LinkedIn activations around sales teams doing some personal one-to-one outreach within your LinkedIn network. Seen that quite a bit lately. I think there's a lot of positive and a lot of upside to that, because obviously, if you've got, let's say you've got a 10-person sales team and a 2-person marketing staff. Well, would you rather have 2 people trying to handle the communications around your company and trying to drive leads and sales and whatnot on multiple social networks, or would you rather have 12? Because in quite frankly, if you train your sales staff, and maybe you can confine them to one network and say, look, you are more of a one-to-one networker. LinkedIn's really going to work for you. Here's how we recommend using it for a lead generation sales outreach technique, and you train that staff member to do that. Now all of a sudden you've got an additional set of eyes and additional hands, additional legs on the ground, so to speak, in social media, helping you drive leads and drive business. So I think it's very, very smart. The challenges are when you are basically putting social media outreach on behalf of your company in the hands of multiple people. It's a scalability issue with regard to training, and it's an efficiency issue with regard to speaking with a consistent voice, representing the company well. And that really just goes back to education and training. You got to hire smart people. You got to train them to do the job the way you want them to do it. Give them some parameters within which to work, but then let them, like you do, sending them out into the workforce to sell your product at networking events and trade shows and so on and so forth. You've got to let them have the freedom to be able to be themselves on their respective social networks, but they have to be able to do that in a way that funnels people back into your marketing funnel so that you can drive leads and sales that way. So it's really a scalability challenge from an education and training standpoint more than anything else. And yeah, you're going to run into varying levels of aptitude and experience with social media among your employees, your sales force. But again, that's an education and training issue, and it really comes down to knowing how you're going to use these channels, what you're going to use them for, how you pull people back into your funnel from these channels, and then training your staff to be able to do it well.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to talk on content just for a minute. You are a content producer in addition to everything else that you do. And in the context of social media and, these different networks and different business objectives, be you B2B or B2C, in your mind, what role does content, both original produced by the company and curated produced by third parties, how does that factor in?
Well, I think anybody who wants to be successful in social media has got to have content marketing in mind, because people want to connect on the social channel. Consumers want to connect with brands and companies and individuals who are going to be useful to them. And you can be useful in a lot of ways, but you can only really be useful in the context of online communications if you are supplying content to people. And that content can be as short as a tweet, 140 characters. It could be a, quote of the day. It could be advice. It could be, back and forth engagement, interaction. That's still content, even though it falls more into a real-time communications category. But so there's a couple different ways that I would think most companies and most brands can look at content, and you sort of touched on this. You've got that sort of original content that you produce, whether it be a blog post or a video or a tweet or a Facebook post or images or a SlideShare presentation or a white paper, webinar, so on and so forth. Or you can also go out and find other people's content and then share and disseminate that content, aggregate it together, and put that on your blog posts or your Facebook or your Twitter, so on and so forth. I almost said tweeter, didn't I? And so when companies do that, you do a couple different things. First of all, if you're producing original content and it is content that the audience finds appealing, you're driving people back to you. You're driving people back to your blog, to your website, wherever you're putting this content. And hopefully when you get their eyeballs there, you can then deliver a call to action that forces them to take action and say, I want to download this. I want to give you my email address. I want to purchase. I want to learn more about this product or service. So you can be really, really smart and produce what I like to call holy smokes content, because your job as a content marketer, quite frankly, is to produce content or find content from the social web. If you're, being more of an aggregator and a sharer, if you will, your job is to find or produce content that makes your audience take action, and people are going to take action, and that action could be share, it could be like, it could be email to a friend, it could be download, it could be buy. They're only going to take that action if they have some sort of emotional investment. And they're only going to have an emotional investment if that content makes them go, holy smokes, that's awesome, that's funny, that's sad, that's something I've got to tell other people about. If you produce content that makes people go, holy smokes, why didn't I think of that? Or holy smokes, this is incredible, I need other people to see this, then you're going to be successful as a content marketer. And again, that can be original content that you produce that drives people back to your website, where there's a call to action where you can persuade them to do something. Or it can be finding other people's content, and you send your audience to other people to get real good intelligence. And that doesn't necessarily directly benefit you in that you can drive them somewhere where they're going to buy something, but it does benefit you in the long term, because you then become a resource. You then become someone that your audience trusts for information, so that when you do happen to mix in something that's on your website or your blog or an event that you're doing, there's a higher tendency of them to respond to it. Obviously, the sweet spot, the magic spot, is when you can do both and do them well. Produce original content that makes people want to take action, drive people to your website, et cetera, et cetera. And then also find other content and share it with people, so that they build up that trust in you over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. In terms of content marketing, I'd love to just hear your thought. How do you think marketers, big and small, should be thinking about that? It's a term that's being thrown around out there. I feel like it's getting to the point where people are potentially thinking about that as a specific role. Do you see it as a distinct role, or frankly just something that every digital marketer needs to be engaged in, regardless if you're focused on one channel or multiple channels?
Yeah, I mean, I think content marketing is the linchpin, to use a Seth Godin term, of successful marketing. You think about it, your advertising messages, that's content. Annual reports for your board, if you're a publicly traded company, et cetera, that's content. Speeches for your CEO, content. Public relations, press releases, content. Press conferences, content. Events, content. Every bit of this, everything we've been doing in marketing all these years is content. Now we're just kind of putting it into a different context and saying, okay, we need to drive content that appeals to our audience, makes them say, holy smokes, and then makes them take an action. And so now if you look at it from that prism, what this is really doing is it's forcing marketing to take a media approach to marketing. It's forcing people to say, okay, instead of producing a product, I also have to produce content that markets that product. And so in order to do that, I might have to produce content that has nothing to do with the product, but has everything to do with bringing me the audience that I want. And so if you look at some of the great content marketing case studies out there, right now, one of my favorites is called manofthehouse.com. And it's one of my favorites because it's targeted at people like me, 25 to 55-year-old guys who like to tinker around the garage, who maybe have kids, they're DIY dads, et cetera, et cetera. And that website, manofthehouse.com, is a blog, and it's just great blog content on tips and tricks for the DIY dad. But if you scroll down to the bottom of the page and you look at the footer, it says plain as day, P&G Productions. It's a blog produced by Procter & Gamble for the sole intent and purpose of bringing that audience together so that they can then show you an ad for Gillette, so that they can then show you an ad for Old Spice, et cetera, et cetera. So they're using let's bring the audience together so that we can display advertisements to them. There are other people out there doing it who say, let's bring this audience together so that we can organically teach them about our product and its benefits and so on and so forth, so that they become passionate, loyal fans of ours. And so I think content is really the linchpin of everything marketers are going to be doing, for the foreseeable future, because without content, you've got nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So lastly, just kind of looking forward, I was looking at your Twitter handle actually just before we got on here, and I noticed you've got over 41,000 tweets, which is Funny because I don't know if you know, we've got kind of a local entrepreneur celebrity here, Josh James, who started Omniture and is now working on his new company, Domo. And he just had a big press event over his 1,000th tweet. So
Okay.
you've been around a little bit longer, but over that amount of time and, given kind of where we're at right now, where do you see things going forward as far as, we've got more networks now, seemingly more verticalized networks with, Pinterest and so forth. What do you see on the network scape? What do you see with the audiences, the actual end users and their sensibilities, and then, ultimately how that affects marketers?
Well, there's a couple of things that I've been sort of looking at, and I'm fortunate enough to be involved in a market research project called The Social Habit, which is a partnership between Edison Research, Tom Webster, and then myself, Jay Baer, and Mark Schaefer. And some of the research that we're looking at is starting to indicate that, or starting to sort of surface, that consumers are inherently visually motivated. The most popular, the fastest growing social networks are Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook. All have a very sort of high concentration of visual photographic content, obviously. We think that, we don't know, we think that video may be sort of the next wave in terms of the easy, portable, quick to upload and share, because as bandwidth gets bigger, as apps get better, so on and so forth, this sort of social video movement, not necessarily YouTube videos, but some of the quick, easy, phone video stuff, is we think that might be the next sort of wave. Not 100% positive yet, but it seems to be that consumers are much more driven to visual platforms. I think from a brand perspective, from a marketing perspective, you're going to start to see companies get a lot smarter about which social networks they're using and why they're using them. And I think you're going to start to see companies start talking a lot more about customer relationship management, marketing automation, building systems and programs that are delivering automated messages, but automated messages that are customized and programmed for the individual user, so that it's much smarter, it's much more relevant messaging. I don't think that we're going to see brands on a parallel note, and sort of in a little bit of an ironic, I don't think we're going to see brands become less personalized and become less personal, but I certainly think they're going to start to use these technologies like marketing automation, CRM solutions, customer resource and relationship management solutions, to make smarter decisions and be much more relevant down to the individual person, as opposed to continue to send these mass messages out there in these very individual mediums.
Do you feel like that's kind of a hole in the market as far as kind of tools for marketers these days? I mean, just some of the terms that you're using, marketing automation, we're very familiar with the whole email service provider world, which includes the likes of, Marketo and Infusionsoft and stuff like that, all of which are, any serious companies employing some set of those tools to help to kind of automate some of their processes. Do you see anything out there on the social front that comes anywhere close to doing that like it does for email or for web?
No, and I think there's two gaps in the marketplace right now. The first gap is among the social technology softwares that are out there. None of them do everything. There's several that do 2 or 3 things that are really nice, but they don't do 4, 5, and 6 that you really need. There's very few social media management solutions that also integrate email or content management. They certainly, help you publish things on social networks, but they don't integrate blog and website publishing. They don't integrate email. They don't integrate marketing automation. There's not a good CRM plugin. And so you've got all these sort of disparate platforms out there, and none of them seem to understand that if 4 or 5 of them would come together and make this like Justice League of America software, it would totally blow the marketplace wide open. Now, you are starting to see smart companies like Salesforce go out and start plucking Radian6, and now they've got Buddy Media, and they've a couple others that they've acquired, and so they're starting to come up with these sort of cloud marketing software solutions that are starting to get there. But the problem is that begets the other hole in the marketplace. Small businesses can't afford any of that crap.
Right, exactly.
So you've got this whole of social technology companies and marketing technology companies in general are very siloed and very sort of, individual niche focused. None of them sort of run the gamut. And when you get one that starts to run the gamut, even if you don't starts to run the gamut. The social technology companies all have probably investors, and investors say, screw small businesses, go after the big bucks because they want a higher return on investment. So small businesses get screwed in the first, from the get go. But once you do get something that's really nice and will help businesses, 97% of the businesses out there can't afford them. So there's two big holes in the marketplace, and hopefully somebody will come along at some point and fill those.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to talk today, Jason. I'm going to link to your book on the post and everywhere else this goes. I know you've got a couple events coming up. You want to plug any of that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we're going to be Explore is my sort of conference series. We're going to be in Orange County, California, October 18th and 19th, which is next week as we're recording this. And so there's still tickets available there. And then I'll give you the website in just a minute because it's the same website. And then November 15th and 16th will be in Portland, Oregon. So the Pacific Northwest is in for a treat. We've got Scott Stratton, Jay Bear, and a bunch of other really smart people coming to Portland. So the website is gotoexplore.co, so not com, gotoexplore.co.
Cool. Well, we'll link for that too.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Jason.